Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Talk to any independent analyst, economist. And the proposal on the table is that Ghana should sign up to an IMF program to save the economy. But is the fund the real answer to the current challenges facing the economy? Now the question is, how many times has Ghana been to the IMF for what many might call a policy credibility program? But look at the current state of the economy right now, even the structure as well. Years after programs to the fund, has anything changed? But if these programs had done the necessary corrections, why is there always a call for us to go back to the IMF? Well, on PM Express Business Edition, we're looking at the IMF program and the Ghanaian economy. What is the way out? The IMF program for Ghana, is that the solution to the current economic challenges facing the country? I'm trying to gauge the thoughts of a former Minister of Finance, Tekpe. Professor George Wiafe is an economist. He also joined us in studio for some analysis and gauge the view of somebody who is always engaging the foreign investors out there. This whole concern about policy credibility. Let's hear from Mike. That is Michael Kobler. He is the country manager of Synergy Ghana and also an investment analyst. Well, all these issues wrapped up as we look at the IMF program, the solution to our current problems or not. Be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As you talk about the IMF program, is it the solution to Ghana's current economic woes or challenge, or whichever name you want to call it with respect to what we're going through right now? There's been talk about us going to the fund. How many times have we gone for a fund program and look at the current state of the economy? Maybe there are other solutions to the current problems than going to the fund. Professor George Wiafe is an economist and he's joining me here in studio. I'm so grateful. Ty Shadow by made it here. Sir Tekpe is a former Minister of Finance and he also be joining us as well. Mike Kobler is an investment analyst and also CEO of Synergy Ghana into investment. He was part of the team that went out to do our first Eurobond and he continues to engage investors out there. And also be getting some other person from the finance committee to join us to make a quick input on this IMF program. Sir Professor Bopping, and thank you so much for your time. Tight schedule on campus, making time to join us here.
Yeah.
I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
But before we talk about the fund program, we cannot forget about fuel prices going up. The transport operators have also signaled that they are going to hike their rates. Some are saying the tough time for the economy, especially when it comes to inflation.
Yes, and that casts a lot of doubts on our ability to bring down on inflation. You look at that together with many other factors, and probably the reason others would say is maybe it's better we go for an IMF program. Probably it may provide some temporary relief for us whilst we try to address those structural imbalances in our economy. So these are challenging times. I'm not sure any government will wish for something like this. Part of that also, it's more like external shocks meeting local realities, right? So, and this is where the test of the resilience of your economy comes to play. So when we say we've done well and all of that, it's in times like this that we see the resilience of our economy. It's in times like this that we see how the economy is able to respond to shocks and the rest of them. Yes, granted that these are global developments, how each country responds or how each country is affected by this global level development will then depend on your own internal weaknesses or vulnerabilities that are in your economy that gets magnified when challenges like this show up.
On the fuel prices, and if you look at the magnitude of increase, and the Ghana has cost service itself, when you look at the drivers, fuel and transport and food are the main indicators here.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, what should government be doing? There's been talk about taxes. If you look at it very well, if those taxes were taken a month or 2 months ago, this margin of increment might have wiped that as well. What can be done? Because GPRT also threatening that they are going to hike transport fares. that is deadly for us when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, but you want to look at that whole sector and value chain. They don't have the balance sheet to absorb those costs. So ultimately, they will have to pass it on to the consumers. They have to pass it on to commuters. And obviously, it will also show up in food prices. And then you just keep going on that way. They can't absorb that. It gets to a point and they have to pass it on. It's the same thing for ordinary businesses. It gets to a point and you can't absorb all of that. It will thin out your profit. It will drive you underground.
Do I get from you that nothing can be done about it?
But I think that there should be a policy level response to some of these things. It may not be that significant, right? But the signal that will send in terms of reviewing some of those taxes as a way of meeting Ghanaians halfway, that may be needful. But of course, government is also mindful of how this would impact its revenue envelope. But these are the trade-offs. But we want to look at the balance of it, right? And say that, okay, it's better we do this at this stage in order to cushion Ghanaians. Or probably you pass it on and then you come with some kind of social safety net, some kind of intervention somewhere in terms of the fiscal redistribution effect. Also, so I think there has to be, I think the long silence from the fiscal side
it's not helping.
It's not helping.
I mean, let's get back to our IMF discussion and just refresh our minds. Yes. How many times have we signed up for an IMF program over the years?
We are very familiar with the IMF.
I mean, just give me the numbers. Help me out on that one.
Until the 2021, we've been there 16 times. And if you add the 2020 COVID one, that's 17 times.
And my question is that why hasn't the structural things that they recommend hasn't impacted the economy?
Well, those are the critical questions. Perhaps the reason why a lot of people wouldn't say the IMF should be the option, because in terms of long-term solutions, we haven't had that in all our program engagement with the fund. But I don't think that we can blame the fund necessarily for that. I believe that we've made some kind of progress anytime that we've been under the IMF, but sustaining that and building on that, we have not done well. And that is more a reflection of probably our own actions and inactions over the years. And that is why. So when you look at the data, practically every 3 years and some few months, we've had to go to the IMF.
Let me quickly bring in somebody who always engages these foreign investors out there. He was part of the team that has worked on our Euro bonds over the years. I mean, one of the critical questions, Prof, has this whole thing about policy credibility. And we'll also be engaging one person who was managing at the economy at that time, and so much argument was made about policy credibility. Honorable Sir Tekpe, former Minister of Finance as well. Let me get onto the Zoom connection and speak to Mike Kombla. He's an investment analyst. I mean, you are all the way in Egypt, Afri-Exim annual general meeting, of course, engaging investors out there. I mean, let me get to you. For you, what are the investors saying right now about the economy? Because one of the critical things that we've been pushing the wall right now is that they are not confident about our fiscal situation. What are the foreign investors, offshore investors, saying right now about the Ghanaian economy?
George, you managed to pull me from my sleep, but I guess we've got to do what we have to do. Well, essentially saying that, I mean, they want to see some critical cash flows that shows that, I mean, we can be able to deal with our debt situation as it were. The problem in the past, going back to IMF, is the fact that you go to the IMF, you are restricted in terms of your borrowing, you have policy credibility. I do not think that is where we are today. I remember when my good friend Seth wanted to go to IMF, we made somebody, he came up with a policy, homegrown policy, growth solutions. Nothing, I mean, I don't think that the IMF came up with something quite different from what we're prescribing for ourselves, except that we are thrown so much mad at the system that nobody believed what we were saying and nobody was hearing us internally. Where we are today, I do not believe that investors are crying out loud and saying that we need to have policy credibility. Investors want to see the hard facts. We need to carry the investors along to know what we are doing. On the fiscal side, are we really cutting down expenditure as we are expected to cut? Are we retaining the kind of discipline that we are? And mind you, in any situation, any government's headache is being able to balance growth and inflation. And we are not in ordinary times. I mean, inflation is all over the place. The COVID situation, the Ukraine war, Russian war, has brought it with difficulties across the world. Question is that how do we put in measures to ameliorate this for our citizenry, to make the situation a bit bearable for our citizens? Can we cut down expenditure? Can we cut down some of the things that we are doing, the growth areas that we are looking at, and make sure that people are a bit more comfortable? Because this situation is a very dire situation. And as much as you write to the IMF will come up with its own restrictions in terms of borrowing, in terms of employment cuts, and it's really not going to solve a lot of our problems. Question is that, are we in ourselves, can we look internally and be disciplined enough and to cut out the areas that we are wasting and to be able to save enough to be able to give the investors the confidence that we have? You know, well, the situation in which we are now, if you run to IMF, the maximum you are getting is about $400 million, $500 million. But the whole is much, much bigger than that. And we need to demonstrate with hard figures, with cash flows, showing that we can really come out of this by cutting out the expenditure that we say we are going to cut and carrying out, showing out the hard numbers in terms of what we really are doing substantially to turn the situation around. I personally don't believe that the IMF is a solution. Like Prof. has said, we've run there 17 times and we've not been able to sustain what was expected of us. I mean, going there at the 18th time, would that make any difference? I doubt that.
So, Mr. Komla, I mean, again, and I come back to the question about these investors because of what their reaction is doing to the economy. As of today, what do they want? Do they see an IMF program as a solution to their concerns or what?
I don't believe that they want to see an IMF program as a solution. Like I'm saying, people are saying we're going to cut, if the government had said that we're going to cut down expenditure, the budget by 30% of the expenditure, show me the figures, show me. Investors are saying, show me, let me know, let me see what your cash flows are, how much revenue has come in, what areas have you actually cut, what is the progress that we are making on the fiscal side? Because we all know that the fiscal has been a challenge right from the beginning, since Adam. So what are we doing about our fiscal? What are we doing about our real sectors? Are we really putting in monies in places that will generate extra cash flow to support the economy? Or we are just doing developmental projects? What are we really doing? What are the hardcore figures? Those are the things that investors want to know. Okay,
let me bring in Honorable Tekpe, and for you, when you hear these calls and what we are going through right now, is it more of a quote reminiscent time when you were in this position before and how these things should be managed? Honorable Tekpe, if you can hear me, I was just trying. Honorable, I was just trying to find out from you as in the current discussion that is going on right now. Is it more of a reminiscent time for you when you were managing the economy that time? You had a program in place to try and correct the necessary challenges, but the development partners, the offshore investors were pushing for a program with the IMF.
George, is it my turn?
Yes, please.
I lost you. Yeah, okay. I lost the connection, but if I get a sense of what you are saying, is and to go back to some of the questions, that you were asking, what do investors want? George, can you hear me, please?
Honorable, I can hear you. I was just asking you that as your time when you were managing the economy and there was push for us to go for a fund program. I mean, in circumstances like this, how do you manage the situation when you believe that you have a program in place that can stabilize things, but our development partners, the offshore investors, are pushing for a fund program to what they call policy credibility for the economy?
Well, in the first place, let me point to the fact that our own Bank of Ghana, if you can look at one of the NPC reports or one of the speeches that were given, used the need for policy credibility. They use those expressions in terms of our fiscal management. So it shouldn't be any alien to us. We went to the IMF because at a very crucial time. We had done a homegrown policy, as Mr. Coleman said, he was engaged. But then when the World Bank and others withheld budget support, and against the background of single spine and against the background of gas not flowing from Nigeria, you have to be pragmatic. You remember it was then that we went to Senchi and we decided that, okay, let's go to the fund. And as he said, we negotiated. In fact, I asked everybody to go to look at the letter of intent and the NEFP. You will see the structural measures that we came to implement there. We tabled them, at the negotiations for the, sinking fund, the infrastructure fund and all those things. We had put them in our budget already, if you remember, 2013, 2014 budget. But let me also point to two things. I think we shouldn't belittle what the IMF has done for us. No country, and it's true for Ghana, let's remember, no country goes to the IMF when the times are good. When the times are good, when the global economy is booming and the rest, few countries go to the IMF. We get our commodity prices right. We repay debts, we spend a lot, we don't build buffers. Then when there's a downturn, that is why you see a chorus of countries going to the IMF. Now, and therefore, IMF programs are corrective. That's the first point. They are corrective of difficult periods. They are not corrective of good times. When we had our 3 oil fields, when we came into sinking fund, to repay the Kufo bond, when we came into, ESLA, in all those buffers that we had, the stabilization fund, don't forget, we took 250 million for COVID. To date, we've taken nearly 400. Nobody was, in fact, we in quote, weaned ourselves of the IMF because the situation was good. Even when we got, 1 billion from the same IMF for COVID, when we got 1 billion from the same IMF for SDR, in total, when we got nearly $6 billion US dollars, for COVID, one crisis. We were saying that we're not going to the fund. We didn't do the correction with 6 billion, nearly 6 billion US dollars. So I'm saying that if you look at the 16-17 programs, they definitely would have contributed to Ghana Ghana stopping the negative growth that was characteristic of the economy going into the 1980s. If there is that graph of our growth, you'll see the oscillation between positive and negative. So they have contributed to stability. The third point that I want to make is when you go to the fund, it is then that investors come to the table. It is then that development partners come to the table. It is then that the World Bank, African Development Bank come to the table. Those are the institutions that give you structural investment support. What we should be doing correctly is using those interventions to build the structural, policies, the growth side of the economy, which Mr. Conrad and others have been pointing out. Mr. Prof. That is what probably we need to do better. And this is where we came in with the structures for paying down debt. You don't keep borrowing, you don't keep refinancing and expect investors to come in all the time and be giving you money for refinancing. That is where we are today. You don't also, have a buffer for managing crude oil prices. We know they go up and down. We started a strategic stock, levy out of ESLA. As we speak, we have collateralized ESLA. And Prof, the reason why the government cannot pay subsidy or it cannot reduce taxes are simple. The money for the subsidy has been collateralized as part of ESLA. Because we had built that money, that's the price stabilization levy. Part of it was used to pay the outstanding subsidy. And then we started the strategic stocks, with top boss. Today, as we speak, that money is not available. It's been collateralized for the ESLA bond. What did we do with that money? The second element is that why are you not able to reduce those taxes and the rest? Much of the energy sector, levies are in ESLA. That is what ESLA is all about, which was meant to pay down, both road and others. Okay. Right. So if you remove them, where are you going to get the money to service the ESLA bond? Okay. Right. So, and let me make this point. Now, so the question, what do investors want? Investors are simply looking at your debt, which is at about 85%. Let's not delude ourselves. We are early in the year. You can quote without bailout and say it's below 80. You can say it's 78, it's 76. When you add all of those, when you take out the fact that, the payment, your amortization, the energy sector bailout, energy sector arrears, which is being buried in amortization, and it's not being shown above the line. When you use your SDR and you bury it in financing instead of showing the flows first, as revenue, because it's grant. That's what it is. And even if it's capital grant, you show it as flows, and then you show how you utilize it. When you do all this, they are looking at your numbers, and they are saying you are using all your revenues.
Okay.
The simple question is,
okay.
You are using all your revenue to pay interest and compensation. You are borrowing to pay to service debt, and you want to come for more debt. How are you going to pay? It's as simple as that. Okay. Our fiscal situation is telling the story.
Honorable, right? I will come back to you to get the clarity from you about whether you believe that the fund program is the option now. But let me get to Mr. Kweku Kwatin. He was the Deputy Minister of Finance previously. And for you, and now Chair of the Finance Committee in Parliament. And I know that if we do take that decision, one of the first institutions that will look at government's letter of intent is Parliament. What do you tell those who might argue that we shouldn't have gotten here for even to have a discussion about whether we should go for a fund program or not?
Yes, we should never have gotten here, but I say good evening to my colleagues on the program, and good evening to viewers. Look, we should never have gotten here. We should never have gotten to a point where we are even having a discussion about going for an IMF program. We shouldn't. Why is that? It is that because IMF is becoming like a drag for us as Ghanaians. That we misbehave ourselves, we misbehave the fiscal, we go for an IMF program. Once they are here, they gave a certain optics that we would be disciplined, and therefore the investors appear to have some elevated confidence. The IMF will leave you after 2 years, 3 years, then the misbehavior starts again. And by misbehavior, I am talking about a country that is living beyond our means, be it under Honorable Setekpe and the NDC, be it under this current administration. We are just spending money that we have not raised. We can go for an IMF program, it will be of no consequence. And I wish that especially with the technical people, we begin to move away from the politics and just tell ourselves the hard truth that we should not have gotten here, but we have gotten here for reasons that, in my opinion, are still prevalent. Our wage bill is unsustainable for both
I think that we are having
office holders, and for we Article 71 office holders, that wage bill is unsustainable. It was unsustainable under the previous.
I think that we're having some challenges, and I'll come back to studio if we can fix that technical challenge, and we'll get back to the studio. And let me quickly get to Mike Kobler, because he has to rush into some meetings again. So for Mike, for you as an independent person, if this government should seek your opinion that to correct whatever concerns that offshore investors have, should we sign up to a fund program? What will you say? Unmute, Mike, please. If you can unmute, I'll be grateful. Unmute, Mike.
No, George, I can hear him. So the problem may be from your end.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Gaston. Let me get back into the studio whilst you correct the. Mike, so I'm just saying that before I want to let you go, that if government should come to you, that for you, should we sign up to a fund program to deal with the concerns of the offshore investors? Would you say let's do it now?
No, I would say we shouldn't. I would say that we should show the hard figures where we are big.
Sorry, let me come to Mr. Honorable Prof. Prof, I mean, for you, what do you, and again, and ask the question about whether we should have gotten here. Are you worried? I mean, you've done a lot of work on the fund program and all the rest of the think tanks. And does it worry you that this discussion even has to come up at this time?
Well, I am not surprised. The reason I'm not surprised is that when we're exiting the 16th...
I remember that interview with you.
Oh, yeah. I said it's just a matter of time.
Prophet of Doom?
Well, I won't say... Look, I mean, we do economics, right?
Yeah.
You look at the data and what the data is telling you. Okay, and you can predict. Because when we're exiting the program, the government came out with certain measures. We didn't follow them. Once you didn't follow them...
The fund came up with some measures even after the exit here.
Yes, the last review.
I remember
and the document that raised. What Ghana government itself said that they were going to do and all of that, so this thing will not happen again. We didn't do that. So it would be strange to expect a different outcome, right? But of course, if you look at the external development and all of that, that has exacerbated the vulnerabilities, it's obvious. But look at it this way. The IMF, nobody is saying is the first result. We are at a point where we have to consider that as our last resort. The reason I'm saying, look, the best time to have signed for the IMF program was actually in 2021. Failure to do so really has elevated the risk in the economy. And you can see that showing up in government borrowing costs. You can see that showing
bonds.
And all of that.
The Federal Reserve has hiked their rates,
so if you,
challenging for cost of borrowing.
Precisely. So the point is that we are almost at a point where you get the impression that government has lost it. And you look at what they call homegrown policies in the 2022 budget and then the enhanced measures. What are the inbuilt monitoring, reporting, disclosure, and transparency that gives greater assurance to investors? That is absent. So what the hard numbers, and I agree with Mr. Kobler that hard numbers, but you only show hard numbers if you have them, right? If you are in possession of positive news, you are eager to disclose that. But what do numbers say? The numbers necessarily do not lend to a situation where greater disclosure would inure to greater credibility. It doesn't. And if you look at it carefully, if you look at the borrowing cost right now, and any attempt to mobilize even external funding right now is going to come at a higher cost. And that is why we are saying that hiding under the IMF and probably the funding arrangement in there, and depending on the type of program we go for, we may get close to $3 billion, probably at no interest cost. And that will reduce your interest costs, give you some briefing space, gather the necessary policy credibility, and then you can build on that, right? But as it stands right now, look, we're already pushing some of those measures, if you look at e-levy and the rest of them. And let me also correct this. The IMF is not in the market to punish any country. We talk about conditionalities and the rest of them. These are things that we should have done probably over an extended period, which we failed to do, and they are crystallizing. So under a short program, they have to be able to neutralize that effect, and it becomes a bit more painful. So what we call conditionalities and the rest of them are actually deferred actions that we should have taken like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago that we failed to do. And these are the things that are driving the structural weaknesses. And therefore, when you sign up under a program, depending on the nature of the problem, that would also determine the kind of reforms that we have to do. And I will say this, and I agree with Honorable Setekwe, that Ghana has benefited in terms of reforms quite a lot.
Isn't that debatable?
Well, it's debatable, but the evidence is there.
16 times the IMF.
Look, when was the last time Ghana sat somewhere? Okay.
If the program has solved the problems, we shouldn't be talking about going to the fund.
That's what I'm saying. When was the last time Ghana sat somewhere, developed actually a homegrown program that we were committed to with the necessary discipline that it requires? We failed to do that on our own. If you look at the 16th IMF program, the biggest problem at that time was the fiscal dominance of monetary policy. under inflation targeting. So one of the things that the system IMF program did for us was the elimination of the fiscal dominance of monetary policy. We amended the Bank of Ghana Act. At that time, we were doing budget financing, right? They reduced it to 0, even though Ghana's parliament pegged it at 5%, but we still work with the 0 and the rest of them. Beyond that, if you look at the public financial management reform and a number of
So you think that it has helped us?
To a large extent, but the problem is that because these issues keep recurring, we haven't had long-term solutions from our engagement with the IMF, and I believe the IMF knows that. But of course, that is not the reason we went to the IMF program. A lot of the times when we go to the IMF program, we are more or less like we are in coma. It's more or less like stabilization.
Bring us back.
Yes, macroeconomic stability. But we all do know that macroeconomic stability is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And even sustaining that macroeconomic stability and building on that, we fail to do that. And that is why almost every 3 years and some few months, we've had to go to the IMF. And the bulk of that is from the fiscal side, borrowing. Why wouldn't the IMF ask you to put a hold on your borrowing if that is the problem, right? And right now, because interest, expense, and compensation of employees take virtually everything, you are looking at getting to the point where even to pay interest on your debt, you may have to borrow.
That's a problem.
That is nothing like, that is more or less like a Ponzi scheme, right?
Prof, a minute and I'll go to my cobbler to let him go off the line, and I'll also go to my other guests on the internet. I mean, have you realized that, maybe I'm wrong, the portion of government is now changing? And I'll get to a quick question on that one. First, it was like, no, we have a program, we can do it. Now it's like, if the program doesn't work, we will consider a fund program. Does it bring some excitement to you? Because you are those who believe, or you are those who share the view that a fund program is needed now to save the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. We saw that under the previous government. In 2014...
And we'll go to Honorable September for a response on that one.
We said we're not going to go homegrown program and all. I believe that it's also, that is what leadership is about, right? When you look at the data, you look at the dynamics, and you realize that, no, it's better I choose this option because that will serve the greater good, at least in the short term, so that it gives us some kind of temporary relief, and then we can build on that. I think that is what leadership is all about.
I'll come back to you about the bit. I was reading a story in a program on the wires today, and was talking about a country that has signed up, as it Tunisia, is starting to be corrected, and they are struggling with some cuts that we're supposed to do. And I'm saying that, listen, if we go to this fund program, are we ready for the consequences that will come with it? My cobbler, I'm asking you, as an investment analyst, a consultant, and advisor, if government should come to you, should we do a fund program now? What are you going to tell them?
So my answer will be no. My answer will be no, because I want government to show investors that we are really tackling our fiscal. Okay, and that has been the challenge. I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that has been the challenge since Adam. So if we can actually show the hard numbers to demonstrate that these are the cuts that we are making, I think that we'll be far better off than creating a situation where we're already in a hole. And to go back to the IMF, it's like you are digging a bigger hole. That's the way I see it. Because then on the commercial side, we forget about the private sector. Because then once you go on the IMF program, there's a certain perception, okay, that there is so much wastage in your system, there are things that you need to correct. So liquidity generally dries up. And investors don't come with cap in hand, following you. A lot of programs that we are undertaking, growth programs that we are undertaking, you will not be able to borrow on a commercial rate to be able to meet those programs. People are already suffering. People cannot make ends meet. People cannot have 3 square meals a day. And the IMF program, we're going to talk about austerity measures. We're already suffering. What kind of austerity measures are we going to put in place again to make our citizenry, give them some kind of cushioning? Okay, so that's the point that's where I stand. Together with some of the analysts that we see, that we have to make the conscious effort to be a bit more disciplined than we are today. It's very simple. Let's cut the wastage. Let's review some of the programs that we are doing, the promises that we have made, all those propaganda things that we have done. It is hurting us. Let us go back and review them. Let us bite the bullet.
biting the bullet. Thank you so much, Mike Kobler, for your thought. I appreciate it so much. Mr. Kweku Kwateng, and you have been, and talking to you in the past, I got the understanding that, listen, we don't need a fund program. I mean, if government should seek your thoughts on what is going right now, and as a chair of the Finance Committee, what are you going to tell them?
Well, I'm going to tell government that we should never, never go for an IMF program. The lessons are too clear to be ignored. What we should be asking is, what is it that is with us as a people that every time we cannot exercise the discipline that is needed to promote the growth and the poverty reduction that we need, that almost every 3 years, somebody, and these IMF guys who come around, they are not extraordinary human beings. Sometimes they are young people, they come directing you left, right with their left hands, do this, you can't do this, they leave you in 3 years, and then you are back to square one. I am extremely disappointed that as a people, over all these years, we haven't learned, and we still want to talk about an IMF program because we cannot exercise the discipline. So, a quick response to your answer. My answer will be no. I think this is the time to demonstrate to the whole world that as Ghanaians, we are capable of looking at our situation and saying that the things we are doing that keeps pushing us to the IMF, we will stop doing them, because if we continue like this, a time is going to come when even going for an IMF program would not give you the credibility you want, because the investors would know that this is how you have always behaved, and that the IMF programs have not produced the kind of internal ability to deal with your fiscal that is required. So we should never attempt this. I will be very unhappy if government decides to go for an IMF program, because I don't think it will be helpful.
But Honorable, some would say your patriotism is not getting you that confidence that you need. You look at what is happening to your bond, the spread, your Ghana cedi recently, a little reaction from these offshore investors, and look at what happened to us. The patriotism, the comments that we would do this, we would do that, everybody doesn't seem to be convinced by it. So it's not about that patriotism that will take the economy anywhere.
No. I'm not talking about patriotism at all. In fact, what I'm saying is that going for an IMF program, it's like a drug. It's a drug that you take for some short-term relief. And unless the fundamental things driving us into this kind of fiscal difficulty are tackled, continually taking that drug is unhelpful. So I am not unaware that the political and the economic, social subcultures that have made it difficult for us to live within our means as a people will be difficult to overcome. But we have no choice but to roll our sleeves and to say this time we will do it. If we're going to go for an IMF program, we may as well make the decision that we have given up, that as a people we can do it ourselves. And so we are always going to take drag when we are in difficulty. If that's the kind of life Ghana wants to lead, we should say it openly and stop pretending that we're going for an IMF program as some strategic move that will help us in the long run. It would never help us. And I respectfully suggest to Honorable Teke and the others that let's move away from this and begin to have some hard discussions about the factors causing our expenditures to be always higher than our revenues, the factors making it difficult for us to raise the revenues to finance our needs. Why can't we discuss those things frontally, make the changes, and have a durable solution to the problem instead of this drag called IMF?
I'll come back to, I'll get Honorable Setekpe to get his concerns about that, and also the real solutions out there, if it's not the fund program, as well as Prof to get his thoughts about it, because it looks like within government itself, there are several struggles and stands about the reality and what we have to do. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back. This is PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the IMF program. Is that the solution to our current economic challenges or not? We'll be right back after this break. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the IMF program. Is that the solution to Ghana's economic challenges? Depending on who you engage out there, they believe that where we've gotten to a fund program is the solution. Honorable Sektepe, I mean, for you hear what government position is. Do you think that, listen, George, let's do this thing. It will save the bigger economy. It will save everyone. Is Honorable Sektepe is on? Can you unmute? I'll be so grateful, Honorable Sektepe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
let me make 2 points. For those who say we shouldn't include my good friend, Mr. Kovner. Look, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. When we say we don't have to go to the fund, we're including my good friend, 2 good friends, Honorable Kwati. We have a budget deficit of 43 billion. It's not 37, of about 43 billion to finance. That is the deficit, right? Including amortization. Now, if you divide it by 7.5, that gives you something around, 6 billion. If you divide by 8, that gives you something around 5 billion. We haven't been able to go to the market last year. We haven't been able to go to I'm talking about the external market. We haven't been able to mobilize enough. Let's say that together with the loans that are on their way to Parliament, we are able to mobilize, let's say, 2 billion US dollars, domestic and foreign. Question, where do you get the additional 4 billion or 5 billion?
You cut expenditure. You cut expenditure.
Yes, no, please. Yeah, no, we have said several times that you should cut expenditure, and it fell on, let me just finish my thought.
Okay.
So the question is, yes, so the point is, where do you get that money? Even before you get a respite. Secondly, which expenditure are you going to cut? Because you have bloated, the first one is compensation. Fine, you may want to, you've taken off NAPCO and the rest, it's not making much difference. Interest payments, you are going to go into the market on a tougher, note, and that is statutory. And those 2 are the ones taking your revenue. So the expenditure, the fact that you are suspending a payment of expenditure is no austerity. It is because you don't have the money to pay. Free SHS and all those things. Let's not do that ourselves. So that is the real question. If you do not get that money, you are bound for default. Let's be pragmatic about the question. Let's over the issue. The next big thing will be default. Because, the one who is holding your bond is not waiting for you. You are at this point now. It's not going to wait for you another 3 months, 4 months, for you to get your house together, before without anybody in a buffer. Now, there is also, and let me reject this outright, and I wanted to be as temperate as possible. You see, this administration had significant opportunities. And I don't think that when we are talking about, the contribution of government over IMF program, this has been the luckiest of all, of governments in recent times. Let me just go back a few numbers. Ghana Infrastructure Fund, 250 million US dollars. We did the sacrifice. It was part of our 2014 bond, and we used it as seed capital for infrastructure fund. 250 million US dollars.
Okay. Honorable Sektepe, sorry for a quick wrap. Because of time constraints, if you can wrap up in a minute or 2, please, I'll be so grateful so that I can have you run up your thought, please.
Yes, the stabilization fund, much of it which was built, almost 400 million to support COVID. Against 3 oil fields, nothing came in, virtually nothing. It was run down. The cap was never, removed. And then you go to Ghana Infrastructure, you go to the sinking fund, cool 250 million to take off the Kufuor bond, the balance. We left that in the kitty. ESLA is supposed to bring in by the government's own record 43 billion Ghana cedis. And yesterday we have not paid, deposited. We left deficit of 6.1. We left debt at 57. And look at where we are with 3 oil fields, right? Above all, the one that gave us the most challenge, COVID, 6 billion US dollars, neat, including Bank of Ghana. First time in nearly 40 years, that we have had that significant deficit financing, right? So I think it's very important that we stop the equalization game and the government should come up, and face the reality that it had a number of benefits and advantages to government, and including part of the money for the ECF. We went to the ECF. We were criticized for it and everything. We didn't finish the ECF. Remember, it was tranches. Almost half of that tranche went to this current administration, the 900 million. So you can see the significant amount of money. So I agree with Honorable Kwasi, we shouldn't be where we are, but it should also not offer an excuse. We did a lot of sacrifice. Around the time crude oil prices are falling. So the point, my quick question is, if we are not going to the fund now, where are we getting the money to refinance the debt? That is a big question. Fixing it. Yes.
Honorable Kwasi, wrap up in 2 minutes, your last thoughts.
Well, my wrap up is that, look, the tendency for people to take advantage of the current difficulties we're going through to make political points is really unfortunate. It is part of the reason we're here. We know.
Numbers, not politics.
Look, the numbers, whatever they are, the numbers have been getting worse and worse and worse over the decades. And if technical people like myself and Honorable Tech cannot look at the fundamentals driving our chronic inability to live within our means, and we want to pretend that an economy that was inherited in an IMF program that we could not even exit at the time we want to exit, we want to make the political case that somehow we left a good economy and it is this administration that has left it. We're never going to solve our problem.
In a minute, please. In a minute.
My simple point is, look, it is not a matter of one administration or the other. It is not an equalization. The average person in the street knows that the situation has always been like this. If we want to be honest and deal with the fundamentals, everybody wanting an asphalt road, the wage bill, we want to deal with those matters, we can do it. If we also want to pretend that it has been good under Honorable Tekwe's administration, even though he took us to IMF, but it is this time that the numbers have worsened.
30 seconds, please. Honorable, but for you, wrapping up, final thoughts.
I think that, look, IMF is not forcing itself on Ghana government. Nobody is forcing government to go to the IMF. I think the numbers are there. If the government is in possession of positive news, they would want to show that. Government has to demonstrate to us that from the 2022 budget and enhanced measures that they announced, this is where we are now. This is the situation, right? So because we need information, we need data to work with. In the absence of that, the people will speculate. But I think where we find ourselves, we can delay for a while, but it's just a matter of time.
Well, I know the debate will still go on in your offices and your homes, and whether we're also ready for the consequences that comes along for a fund program and the austerity measures. Thank you so much, Honorable Setekwe. Thank you so much, Honorable Kweku Kwateng. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much, Mike Kobler, joining us far away in Cairo for this connection of the discussion. And thank you so much, Professor Godfrey Bobkin. Challenging time on campus, but still made it a studio with us. We appreciate it so much. The debate will go on, a fund program or not, to deal with the current challenge. Have a great day.